The NBA has brought in some new media partners to the dance. Let's see what they've done so far next on Beyond the Locker Room. So the NBA now has, after the TV deal that was done earlier this year, they've done a big deal, 11 years, about 76 billion, huge deal. A lot of people had, some journalists had forecasted that was a possibility about 3 years ago. I myself thought that number was possible. I know I saw quite a few people did not think it was possible, for various reasons. They saw the ratings being stagnant in this case. Concerns about, who's the next star, this, that, the next thing. And I'm looking at it from a marketing standpoint and just how the market is. Sports is high priority in this case of the property for TV stations and streaming channels. It's the one thing that's still appointment TV, and that alone will make you valuable. And considering the NBA is arguably, I think it's no question, North America is the second biggest league in North America. And right now, I think it's either the second or the third, depending on which year you get, in the league, league in the world behind the NFL. And usually it flip-flops between the IPL and themselves as the next biggest leagues in the world. It's a global sport, and there's a lot of reasons why you can see why different properties from TV to streaming would be interesting getting the NBA. And they have a market and they have an audience, which is also very profitable for media companies, which is obviously that 18 to 49 demographic, especially it's pretty balanced with men and women, unlike many other sports. So it makes a very juicy, enticing property to get underneath your banner as a media company. So, who are the new media companies? Well, let's start with who's still here. We've discussed this a little bit on Basketball Rewind, but just for those who are catching up now and just watch the game casually, ABC/ESPN, which is owned by Disney, they still are considered the number one partner. I'll get into that in a second about that status from the contractual standpoint. NBC or /Universal at NBC Peacock, they will have kind of like secondary status with the new deal. And the third group that's involved in this now is the first time ever NBA is now in bed with a streaming company as Amazon. So what do they all bring to the table? Why did this deal come about? And one of the things I think the benefits that are being already reaped already by the league is the reason why this deal was necessary and why these partners were the best partners at this time for the NBA. So the deal's coming up. The first right to refusal was for the existing partners, which was TNT and ABC/Disney. Disney at the time said, yeah, we're in. They had a certain time frame to make their mind up if they wanted to continue with the deal and at what price. They stated it what it was, and they put down their money, and they put down a hefty sum. I can't remember. I think for some reason 2.6. Don't quote me on it. 2.6, 2.7 is what they're talking about $1 billion for. Cool. So the mouse was back in the fold, and fine. The more interesting one was what happened with TNT, Warner Brothers. So there's been, I'll put it this way. There's something I saw about 2-3 years ago where I saw the commissioner. You can see him kind of putting the tea leaves together. And he's very different than his predecessor. If you want to look at it from a standpoint of a tool set, David Stern was more like a sledgehammer. Adam Silver is more like used as a scalpel. And what do I mean by that? Is the approach he had for the media companies. So when it came to the existing ones, I have a feeling, I don't think you ever tell him, or he'll ever tell you, but if you gave him true serum, I think he would say, what he feels about the media companies. And I think the actions that we see since then have kind of proven, I think is giving me more justification to think that is the case. I think he thought that the media companies, the media partners that they had previously were letting the league down and not being good partners. I would, in that sense, if that was his assessment, I would agree with that assessment. Now, going back to TNT, they also had the right to kind of, I guess the right to sign back in or right of refusal, however the term is. But they had a chance to kind of say, hey, we're making sure we don't open it up for anyone else. We want to go back in. David Zaslav, who's the head of Warner Brothers, decided, made a few comments about a year or so ago and said, we don't need the NBA that much. which sent shockwaves not just through the sports media world, but also in TV in general. Like, oh, really? Oh, use a big dog TNT. Okay, then. Which then led to where we ended up, where they didn't want to pay that amount of money to get back into the game. And then by the time they realized how much of a disaster it was going to be for their network, they started scrambling, trying to get back in. You started hearing all sorts of things. That's once NBC decided to essentially buy the TNT package. And you heard all sorts of stuff. Zaslav saying, oh, we're going to sue them and stuff like that. They were never going to sue the NBA. That was never going to happen. It was just all sorts of things to make him look good, because the Charles Barkleys of the world were giving him hell left, right, and center about what the heck are you doing, as well as many other media outlets. But to go back to why I think this is the case with Silver, and why I think he was making this approach, and why he probably wanted to get out of the contracts of these two partners, definitely TNT, is that, one, TNT is on cable. And I think anyone that knows, or anyone that's even followed the TV game, or the media game in the last 5 to 10 years, and then followed the media landscape, cable is essentially dead. There's no need to have anything on cable if you're a big-time A-list property, as the NBA is. That was hurting them. That was hurting them for the ratings. I think, and for various reasons. One, because nobody in this case, and especially America, many people don't bother with TNT to begin with as a place to go to watch stuff, which then makes your lead-ins into the NBA very weak. Because if you're playing Supernatural or Charmed about 20 million times a day, there's not really a lot of great opportunities to sell, hey, tonight there's a game, the Lakers and Thunder playing tonight at 8 o'clock on TNT. It doesn't really have that much impact if you barely have anyone watching the shows throughout the day. So you're getting nothing out of it from an ad and promotion standpoint of the games that are being telecast on there. Two, with the cord cutting going on, having that much of your inventory on ESPN and TNT was going to be very problematic for another decade, considering that so many subs or subscriptions have been dropping like a stone each and every year. ESPN's got their own issues with that. TNT is even worse in that sense. So that made no sense to keep staying on that. And what that means is, in this case, when you do stay on cable, your ratings are obviously naturally lower. So when everyone says, oh, the NBA's ratings are dropping, people are looking at it from a standpoint, oh, it's the state of play, which there's some issues with that. Trust me, I've had my issues with the state of play in the NBA as far as being too much of the same. Everyone wants through, pace and space. That's fine. But be honest with you, I think there has been last couple of years, there's been some differences in styles again, which is great to see. But I think the bigger issue is that you got to go where the eyeballs are, and the eyeballs were not on cable. So when you have about, I don't know, let's just say 80% of your inventory on cable, and I'm talking about even, and probably even higher, quite honestly, if you go through the playoffs, it's like you can't have that as something that's going to be actually worthwhile, that you're actually generate enough buzz by the time you get to the finals, where it's like, okay, if other people haven't been following the playoffs to this point, you're literally starting them from scratch. And there will always be a percentage of those people, but there's ways to actually build that audience up to, by the time you get to the finals, everyone's on board of what the situation is, who's at the dance when the finals comes around. One of the great things in this case here that the NFL has always done, unlike all the other major sports in North America, it never went to cable as the alternative. So they've dipped their toe in the water with cable, and it's had very mixed results, I would say. That's Monday Night Football. It hasn't really worked out great. I would say the last couple of years they've given them better matchups. That's helped a bit. But even then, you see a lot of times, especially early in the season, they've done simulcasts where the game's on ABC and it's on ESPN, just to try to bolster the ratings and get more eyeballs on the game, instead of putting like a rerun of The Bachelor. So you can see them actually kind of like realizing that as well too. And the NFL doesn't play around with their product, which is something I would say for the critics of Adam Silver, I would say at times he's a little too soft on the media partners, where sometimes you need to put down your foot and say, yo, man, respect our league. If you're going to be a partner with us, certain things we won't stand for. And that's the next part I'll get to. Why I think he wanted to get off these partners, or at least in this case here, reduce their impact. Because these partners, I say those so loosely as partners, have some individuals on their shows and on their broadcasts that are not in it to try to help build the NBA. Therefore, we help build, as the NBA gets stronger, it helps us as a channel. They're in it for themselves. I'll say so boldly. When you have Stephen A. Smith and then the guys on the inside of the NBA, and most in particular, I say Charles and Shaq, that have no interest in actually building up the league. If anything, they see them the league as a foil for them for them to build up themselves, to get more ads, to get more sponsors, to get more notoriety, to stay quote relevant, to get maybe other opportunities. That's what they see themselves as foils to the league to build up their own stature. You can't have that. And if you think I'm crazy saying so, for any of you guys in this case here, I'm sure for many of you guys that watch this channel, watch other sports as well too. And I tell you, as sitting down here, please tell me if you think otherwise. Put, once again, like, comment, subscribe, put the comment down below. If you can think of any other league where you have their two partners in this major partners badmouth and bleep talk the league as much as those individuals do on a daily, weekly basis. Period. I'm not even talking, and yeah, you can say, well, Stephen A. Smith does that on First Take. Granted, I agree with that, but he's also in the NBA broadcast last year, and it wasn't much better. When you're out there in a ridiculous white suit coming through the tunnel of the Garden, as if, in a Game 7, as if you're one of the players, and that's what we're starting off with for a Game 7, it's a joke. And I'll tell you why in a second when we get to the new partners, but it's a joke. And I think right now what you're seeing, and what you saw there, I think Silver started setting the things in place where I'm not sure, hush campaign, whisper to Jimmy Pitaro, who heads up ESPN, whomever it may be. But when they first, about 2 years ago, said, like, you know what, it's been fun, Jeff Van Gundy. That was the beginning of the end for all these dudes. That it was like, okay, he's getting serious now. Van Gundy off the telecast, Mark Jackson soon followed. Once again, part of the brigade in this case here that was complaining about every single thing they can find. Now, if you just walked off in this case here like an alien just dropped down the planet and you started watching sports, you would swear in this case here, the NBA in this case here is in a whole heap of trouble. And like all these great issues around it and stuff like that. Compare the NBA with their rank and file to just the NFL or even Major League Baseball. The NFL's got guys running in and out of jail for all sorts of reasons, left, right, and center every day. The NFL, in this case, treats it like a flea on them, and they flick it away, and they just keep moving on, and their partners know, like, you know what? We'll state it, and we're done. We're not talking about it ever again, guys. That's it. They don't mess around with that. They try to do so. Now, for better or for worse, that's the way they've done it, but it's been very effective for the NFL. I would say the same thing goes with many other sports in this case here, where you don't hear nothing like that. They don't badmouth the players. They don't badmouth their stars. They don't do none of that. If you, as I said, I've always made this comment when discussing this. David Feherty, very funny, very jovial, very charismatic fella, does golf, announces golf. He got the opportunity to announce at the Masters in the early rounds. And he made a comment one day on one of the Masters telecasts where he's talking about how fast the greens were in this case here is like bikini wax. Paraphrasing. You can go check it up on Google what the actual phrase was. That's essentially the point. That's how fast they were. The Masters officials were so offended by it, they said, like, nah, dude, you're not doing this again. And I swear, as God is my witness, and whoever else you want to pray to, David Feherty has not seen not only a chance to do the Masters ever again. David Feherty, I don't think, has done broadcasting, period, on any sort of tournament since then. This is, now that there is like some serious, hardcore, totalitarian stuff, right, when it comes to that. And the NFL has their things there about protect the shield. They're pretty rough with it too. But my point is, I'm not even suggesting they got to go that far in the NBA. But you got to put your foot down on some things. And at least now, that was the first signal with Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson going that they're not messing around anymore. The next thing you saw was an interesting play as well too is when the TNT deal, and they gave the opening for TNT, once TNT said they didn't want to actually match, I think is the right term, match the deal, and to get back into the thing. That gave the opportunity to open it up to other partners, and it gave the opportunity for Silver to finally rid himself of this huge, pretty much this thing around his neck. Because being them a cable network, and then the fact in this case here, you can't promote it properly because they're on a cable network no one watches. And then thirdly, when they're on there, you got inside the NBA guys just crushing your product every Thursday night. How is that helping sell anything? And all these folks say, oh, the NCAA, the NBA guys, they're so funny, blah, blah, blah. I'll ask you guys this. If you go to a restaurant and your buddy in this case here that is supposed to be promoting the restaurant tells you, oh my gosh, man, the beef's tough, the lettuce is wiltery, and this, that, and the next thing. Would you be interested in going to the restaurant, people? Would you be interested? Would you be interested? That's all I got to ask about that. I'll leave it there. If you're a partner, you're a partner. We are in this together to build up this product called the NBA. So therefore, it helps all of us. It helps us make more money. It helps you make more money. It helps promote more players. It helps promote the game. Voila, great. Everyone's happy. But that's not what was happening. We had certain individuals in this case that wanted to make it about them, and they felt like they had to be the story. So this is where the opening came now, and then NBC stepped in, who wanted to get back in the game for a while. And NBC, for some of the younger viewers that are listening here that didn't have the experience at NBC before, NBC did a great job after CBS in the 80s had it. And CBS did a great job too, don't get it wrong. CBS is great. So I remember having apprehensions when NBC got it from CBS. We're like, what? Because CBS had a great show. They had Tommy Heinsohn, they had Brent Musburger, and so on and so forth. They had a really good show. And you're like, oh, so, like NBA and CBS is like, Dick Stockton, like they had serious folks. So you're sitting there going like, oh, what's this going to look like now? It's going to go to NBC. And NBC did their things. They made it more vibrant. They made it more, I guess what you want to call it, more relevant, more hip, if you want to call it that. Speaking more to the youth that was today in the 90s. And it hit home, of course, with the Round Ball Rock theme song, the peacock coming there and lighting up, and then placing all the starters of today in there. And the thing about it is a very important part about this too. As much as, of course, Jordan was the ultimate star of that era, the way they presented it wasn't Jordan, the Jordanaires. They presented it as, here's the NBA. Now Mike might get to be the last picture, or it might be the first picture. I couldn't remember in this case when they used to have the features. It might have been the first. I think it was the first. But nonetheless, you would get everything from him to Patrick Ewing to John Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, you name it. They would be going there. Clyde Drexler, blah, 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 blah. David Robinson and stuff like that. As Elijah Wan, you get all the sense like, okay, pretty much giving you a sense like if you're watching a movie, here's all the stars of the movie. Okay, then. So therefore, if you're sitting down there with a buddy that doesn't watch hoops, or your girlfriend doesn't watch hoops, or your grandmother, it's like you can explain to them. It's like, okay, they might know Michael Jordan, they might know Magic Johnson, but they didn't know the rest of the guys. Like, okay, and bringing them into your household, therefore making them household names too. That's how we do it. And I think NBC getting involved, I was so happy once they got the deal. I was so happy they got TNT out of there. I actually thought inside the NBA was going to be done, but heck, man, they're like a corpse in this case, or they're like zombies. They keep rising from the dead, and they decided to run over to ESPN. Mind you, as this whole dance was going on, Charles Barkley was talking about he's going to retire, and he can't do what he's going to do without the guys in Atlanta. And EJ said he's an Atlanta guy, and blah, blah. Fine, they've kept the studio in Atlanta, so in some ways they kept their promise. But don't mind these dudes, man. These guys are all about the buck like everybody else. Okay, all about the buck like everyone else. And then when it's said and done, they used to remember they used to make jokes. I saw someone put on X the other day how Charles Barkley, these guys used to make jokes about how much they used to be working folks at ESPN because it'd be on every station possible and on every show possible. And now look who's there doing that now. Oh boy, how the mighty have fallen. Isn't that interesting? Anyways. So, so that's kind of give you the brief of where things were. So let me get into the next half of it now. Where things are going. So NBC is now in the fold. Amazon's in the fold. What do I think of the coverage I've seen so far from both? I would say this. Both partners in this case, and you can see that they've had a discussion with the commissioner, or implicitly have had the sense of what the commissioner is looking for. He's given hints in press conferences that he's looking to build up the league and having a positive type of reinforcement of the league by his partners, by hinting at it. He hasn't told anyone what they should do, but they understood the assignment. And NBC was always naturally like that already to begin with, and they picked up right where they left off in the early aughts. And with when it comes to that type of mindset, they're playing into nostalgia is more their angle. I liked the hires they had, which knew that they're actually looking to have guys that actually knew how to analyze the game, not looking to try to become a caricature. So when I heard Jamal Crawford, which is probably the best analyst they had over there on TNT, he's one of the young and upcoming kind of stars. I was very happy. All the other guys they brought over, of course, in this case, Iron Eagle's son. He's doing the games as the second level. Mike Tirico, of course, is the flagship announcer, which wasn't surprising. He would get the A game, which showed you how serious they took the property. That was great. I must admit, the only hire I didn't like was Reggie Miller had to find a way to get himself on there, which hopefully only a few more years I got to deal with him. But yeah, that was the only unfortunate hire. They picked up Grant Hill, another great hire from TNT family. I think that was fantastic hires. The guys at the desk, they're fine, but they're contemporary guys that actually just came out of the league. They're not guys from 20 years ago. Old men sitting on their lawns saying, "Get off my lawn," like how Shaq and Charles and Kenny are. And I think, you see Vince, T-Mac, Mello, working there with Maria Taylor, of course, coming from her own experience. Ironically, that was the big huff that, Rachel Nichols was making about her in this case here. And lo and behold, hey, man, things work out a certain way, man. The karma seems to work a certain way. She got out of Dodge, and lo and behold, things will come to you when they're ready to come to you. And now look here. She's now hosting the NBA on NBC. And has to deal with all the politics and nonsense and messiness that is ESPN. Now, that is the angle. Now, some of the things I like what they've done, simplicity. And I think both of them, Amazon and NBC, have done this very well. They make it about the game, making it about the NBA. Not just about how they speak about it. And in this case here, I think NBC has really done a great job of the storytelling aspect of it. The promos coming into it, I think they just did one last week with Marv Albert doing the rivalry of the Sixers and Celtics. That's what we're talking about. You're right? You always hear about the NFL promotes the teams, the NBA promotes the individuals. To some extent, that's fair. I'm not saying that's not the case. But that wasn't always the case. I got enough gray hair to know that's not always been the case. The NBA up the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s was about the teams as well as the stars as well too. They were able to do walk and chew gum at the same time. And to see that NBC's trying to bring that back was showing the rivalry of Boston and Philadelphia, which is one of the biggest rivalries in the sport. And they got a fantastic game, by the way. They've gotten great games from the jump. Okay, heck, OKC Houston was a fantastic game to start the season with. So they've been getting great games too that's delivering. But they start with the storytelling that Marv gave you the start from all the way back in the 60s and the 50s with these two teams and how it went up to today. So I thought that was a great, especially for younger viewers, that kind of like very instantaneous of today's world. I could call it your 2K world, and that's it. Like, no, there's more to it than that, man. There's more meaning to some of these games than just that. And I think that was great from that perspective. Still focus on the players. They highlighted Maxey and how great a season he's having so far. Talk about Jaylen Brown and, of course, the Celtic tradition. Man, that's what you want. That's what you want. Second thing for NBC's broadcast, which has been really good. The way they've used, and this is, I said before, Amazon, I missed this point before, Amazon and them have done a good job making it about the game. But one of the things that both of them have done in a display way is when you look at the scoreboards, you barely even can tell where the game is on. All you see is NBA. In the scoreboard, and the Peacock logo is grayed out. They say, it pretty much a subtle way of saying it's not about us. It's about these guys on the floor. Check them out. Nothing to do with us. We're just here to be the messenger. Amazon's the same way. Amazon's even more discreet. Amazon literally got the little smile there at the bottom. Just a little smile there in the scoreboard smile. You would not know. Compare this in the past with ESPN and TNT, where they got a big logo slapped in the right-hand corner. They got the logo right there between the two team scores. Hey, it's about us, TNT. It's about us, ESPN. This is what I'm talking about, where it's like, very subtle. This is about the game, nothing to do with us. The analysis for both have been very much about, about the players, no personal attacks, no trying to make, poppy show or something, of individuals just so you can get your jokes on. It's very much a very straightforward nuts and bolts analysis. What a shock. I don't know where we got to, why we think in this case here, we thought we should be going around doing like petty feuds in this case here, like pseudo feuds like if we're online. Keep that crap online. We don't need that, that X mentality on broadcast. You don't. So I think that was fantastic to go down that route for both broadcasts. And just on the NBC side, They've kept it very much on that. The analysis has been great. Breaking down what they've done in this case here during the game and see what each team has to do to kind of get over the finish line to get the win. That's what we want. You see it in every other sport. They don't, NFL, golf, hockey. They don't go around doing other stuff like that. Anytime when those things start happening, and you got guys who want to be bigger personalities in the game, it doesn't help your game. It doesn't. All right. In this case of Toronto, sorry, so if I offend some folks, ask Don Cherry. I'll just leave it at that. Now, to the Amazon side of things, they've gone a different tack, where they're not stepping into nostalgia. They're looking more futuristic. And some of the stuff they've done, where it's the layout of their studio, they have a post-game show where they're in the couches and they're talking about the game as the guys are shooting around their house. Taylor Rooks playing the point guard is shooting it back to each one of them. They have a TV set, in this case here, a screen or monitor, where they could go and talk to guys after the game and have good conversations, just going back and forth about stuff. There was an interesting comment by Jokic the other day when they had the Friday game a couple weeks ago, where he kind of just said, after they're signing off and Jokic was leaving and stuff, and then they thanked them, he goes, and you can hear him saying this is good, this is fun, this is good. And I get, and I'm no mind reader what Jokic, what Nikola was thinking, but I think what his mindset probably was, I wouldn't be surprised if this was I enjoyed the experience dealing with this. This was cool. And Jokic, for a guy who you don't get much out of, that says a lot if he's saying that. So this is what I'm talking about. You can't have antagonistic relationships with your partners, where players don't even want to speak to the folks, in this case, after the game, when you deal with the knuckleheads inside the NBA, or even, and then we start with Stephen A. Smith and his nonsense. They only want to deal with these guys. You don't need none of that. You got OKC not even wanting to go and interview with TNT because in this case, they felt the disrespect the entire year by these guys. Like you say, who are these guys? That's your job to know who they are. I remember Shaq asking about Pascal Siakam, didn't even know who he was. He just won a championship. In the following year, he's like, oh, who's this? No, dude, that kind of crap, we're not getting over on that anymore. The Amazon side, love what they did. Their studio, in this case, headed by the great Taylor Rooks. You throw in there Steve Nash, give me a point guard perspective. Dirk, in this case here, with his dry sense of humor, which he's been great on TV for years. So I was happy when he got picked up. Obviously giving you the superstar, the longevity type of perspective. Blake Griffin giving you the phenom look when you come out of school type of thing, where you're the #1 pick overall type of feel about him. And he's obviously fantastic on TV. Great humor. So he was a great pickup as well, too. I was looking forward to seeing him, and his connection with the guys has been great. And, of course, the Udonis Haslem, he's been great. He was pretty good at ESPN, but I think you see the growth of him being able to kind of expand on his thoughts a lot more, and seeing the kind of how he breaks down the games, having the experience of being there for 20 years, being either playing or on the bench in Miami. So giving you that role player feel and giving that perspective. I think they have a great balance with the five of them. It's really a fun show to watch when they break down, essentially break down tape with an LED court. So you see that they're taking the futuristic mindset of where they're going with it and breaking down offensive structures, defensive, plays, and see how guys are discussing and debating if it's the right idea to do this or that, the zone up, when not the zone up, when the double, when not the double, when to attack the hoop or when to pull it back out, all these type of things where if you're a hoops fan, this is the type of stuff you want, man. And Amazon's been great. They, too, have gotten great games. They just got a great one with Golden State and San Antonio. Arguably, I think, the best game I've watched all season. And there's been some great games this season. And I think that was the most enjoyable game I had all season. And, of course, the great Kevin Harlan being their lead announcer. So they got Harlan. They get, who else is the other person? They have an Iron Eagle. So, so they have, two of the best in this case here. Harlan is the best today. Iron Eagles right up there. They have, and so they have great guys in this case here working with them. I can't remember who they have. Actually, I think Grant Hill's with them, actually. Yeah, Grant Hill's with them, I think. But nonetheless, and Brent Barry doing the game with Harlan. And Brent Barry's always been solid, too, on TNT or NBA TV. I always thought he's a guy who could get more run. It's good to see him having an opportunity, just getting into the game and enjoying the great moments in this case of the game. So just to give you a bit of what's going on with the other channel that's still there, ESPN's still there, ABC/ESPN still there. The Jokers from inside the NBA are over there. When I say jokers, I don't really mean EJ really, but the other ones. And to be honest with you, Kenny's not too bad, but I will get to an example where Kenny kind of missed the point in a second, why I give the contrast between them. ESPN, it seems like, they're catching a little flack, and I think they're now realizing that they're trying to play catch up. I think for them making the move to put Tim Legler on the head broadcast was something where they were trying to get ahead of what they expected was coming. Legler, in this case, is a much more nuts and bolts, schematic type of guy. Very good. I got no problem with legs. I think, as unfortunate, I think a lot of people gave hell to Doris Burke, and I thought Doris Burke was fine. All of a sudden, Doris Burke gets in the big chair. All of a sudden, now it's like, oh, we don't like this about Doris Burke. Doris Burke sounded like Doris Burke. It ain't changed one bit if she's with Mark Jones or she, in this case here, with Breen. So I thought it was a bit overstated, but whatever. Doris is there in the second group with Mark Jones again. The two of them have great chemistry. They're fine. And to be honest with you, with the exception of the Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, Breen combo, which used to drive me up the wall, I always felt that Doris Burke and Mark Jones was a much more pleasurable listen to than those guys, to be honest with you. Because if I had to hear one more time of Van Gundy complaining about this, that, the next thing, the only thing that was interesting is when he showed about, you might talk about his crush on Rihanna if they're at a Heat game. That was always a little fun. But besides that, and maybe a few catchphrases for Mark Jackson, Mama, there goes that man, or man down, hand down, man down. It's fun to listen to once in a while, but it was stale after a while. Very stale. So from that perspective, I think there's good moves to shake it up. On the broadcast, and in this case on the halftime shows and the pregame show, it's still a bit of a mess. Still too short. Still too bing, 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 instead of like giving guys the opportunity to give their thoughts about stuff. With Malika and stuff like that, when they do have Malika do it, in this case here, the Inside the NBA guys, they picked up where they left off. Take it for what it is. I do think, though, they are trying, and I think they see that they gotta kind of step up now. So they're trying to actually give some more analysis. So it's funny how they even realize, like, okay, maybe we've gone too far. Perfect example of this was about a week or so ago when Luka was out. Obviously, LeBron's out for the Lakers. Austin Reeves is carrying the load. He was on a heater. I watched this game too. Great game. Another great game. Timberwolves, Lakers. Literally, Lakers had the lead and Timberwolves dragged it back in there. They were going to win it. Reeves comes in and did a little teardropper, floater in this case here. They'll end the game. I think that night he scored 51. They come to now to talk to the guys about it afterwards on Inside the NBA. And, and then the guys are talking, Charles and everyone talking their bit, get to Kenny. And Kenny says, pretty much gave the equivalent of, yeah, all right, and talk about how pretty much, this is his Jeremy Lin moment for Austin Reeves. And at that point, I was like, okay, let me see where this is going to go. Usually in this case here with those guys here, they would make more jokes. Everyone would jump on it. They'll be like little schoolboys in the back of the portable. They're cracking up jokes and stuff like that. Interesting thing happened, though, which I did not expect. Charles and Shaq kind of pushed back on Kenny, saying, like, whoa, Jeremy Lin, dude. Like Austin Reeves in this case is a way better player than Jeremy Lin ever was. Like, dude, he ain't no flash in the pan, no disrespect to Jeremy Lin, but that's essentially what he was saying. For that moment there with the Knicks, that's what he was getting at. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about, man? It's like, dude, these are two different levels of players, man. Austin Reeves has played for Team USA. What are you talking about? So for that there, for them to push back on Kenny and even EJ come at him a little bit, it was like, oh, so maybe something's hit home a little bit where it's like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't rag in this case here the moment a guy that has a great moment. We saw it in week 1 with Shaq in this case here. And once again, notice this, folks, when you keep watching the TNT or Inside the NBA telecast, it ends up being about them, not about the players, not about the league. When Wemby had that great game of 41 or wherever, I can't remember, in the opening week, they're playing TNT, I can't remember who they're playing, and he was just destroying them. I don't know if he was Houston, wasn't, but San Antonio was just killing someone. And, and Wemby was doing Wemby things. I think it was Dallas, actually. I think it was my team. Yeah, I think he was giving the business to my team. It was Dallas. They come back. You think they'd go big up Wemby and the historic performance it was and where it ranks amongst great performances and stuff like that for opening week and this, that. No. Chuck immediately started saying, like, yo, man, that dude would kill you, Shaq. Why is Shaq involved in any conversation? Which you knew what was going to happen. Pretty much, it's like death in taxes. You knew exactly how Shaq was going to respond. Oh, man, he ain't doing nothing to me. That ain't nothing, man. I could do that. Now we're down to demeaning Wemby's performance, because now it's not about Wemby anymore. It's now about Shaq and his feelings, and Chuck making it about Shaq. And it's nothing to do with the great performance now the young man had. It's nothing to do about where the Spurs might be going based on what this performance looks like. It's nothing to do about the NBA in general. It's now about me, get a shot, my buddy in this case here, and a shot in his feelings now has to come back now twice as hard to make him look like a tough guy, and now pretty much badmouth the performance of Wemby in some subtle way, and sometimes not so subtle way. That's the difference between the Amazon and the NBC broadcasts and what these jokers have on ESPN. That's all I gotta say. I don't even bother watching the show much anymore. I'm done with it because I know there's alternatives. I just go to watch the game. When the game's done, I flip the channel. Up to you what you guys want to do. That's how I see it. Anyways, as I said before, I love what I'm seeing right now with both telecasts. NBC and Amazon has made it a very pleasurable watch on both fronts. The fact is, there's more, and this idea that you're paying more of stuff like that, it's like, guys, there's more NBA games on regular TV, antenna TV, than we've ever seen in like years, going back to the NBC days. So you're going to have them on every Tuesday night. You're going to have a game. Some nights you might get a double header in this case on the Tuesday night. And moving forward, you're going to get a Sunday night game coming forward once NFL is done on the same NBC channel. So I don't know what people complain about. And you're going to eventually get Saturday night games on ABC too, because they still got those games. So you're getting more. So if you don't have cable, stuff like that, you're technically getting more games on Rabbit Ears, network TV, that we've had in years. Stop the complaining, people. That's all people want to do, complain about so many different things, and there's so many good things to love about this season so far. Great games, great matchups. A lot of young players now kind of putting their feet in the water and kind of drawing the line of like what their type of players are going to be. It's a great time when we switch eras now, from say the LeBron era now to the Wemby era. That's great. Doesn't mean we got badmouth LeBron or we got badmouth Wemby. It's all good, man. It's just, hey, what does it say? What's my man Elton John say? Circle of life, man. That's how it's supposed to be. That's great stuff. And the ratings, by the way, the ratings are through the roof. For NBC keeps on putting out their ratings, and it's like I think the first 2 weeks is like the most watched in like something like 10 years or something like that. The opening night was the most watched in like 15 years, I think, or something like that. So the ratings have been great. So just make sure it's not just me saying so. People are in this case here responding, and I think what the hopefully what this does is, and this is what I'm hoping for, that they set the pace on how discourse will be for basketball moving forward. And I'm talking about Amazon and NBC, and folks will follow suit with their discourse online. Because don't think the two are not connected. They are connected, folks. You might not think so. There is a connection. It's a symbiotic relationship. And what I'm hoping is that as more folks, this next generation coming up, they're in their teens and younger, they don't have all this toxicity. They can come and just enjoy the games, enjoy the greatness of the players, and the athleticism of them. Anyway, those are my thoughts today about the new media rights deals. A little bit of a long one, but I really wanted to kind of get into the details of this one. Hope you listen to it from right to the end here. As always, you can find me on the social media platforms like X. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Blue Sky. And as always, you can find me right here on YouTube, where you can like, comment, and subscribe right down below, man. I appreciate all the support. And once again, we'll talk to you soon. Peace.